Hello, welcome to Midco Sports Magazine and our look at recruiting. It is obviously a huge topic, but we're just going to slice it up a little bit, take a look at the process of the way that colleges and universities go about identifying and pursuing and ultimately signing high school athletes. Alex Heinert will show it to you from a coach's perspective. Stories about the stress and the craziness and the rewards of the recruiting game through the eyes of 4 coaches from the Division I, Division II, and NAIA levels. Jason Andera will show it to you from an athlete's perspective, including the story of one high school running back who has gone to great lengths to get himself noticed, plus stories of the stress and the relief through the eyes of athletes who have been through the process. Well, right now, February 4th is signing day for football players across the country. It's also signing day for water polo players and soccer players. Basketball and most other sports, all other sports, have their regular signing period that starts on April 15th. But signing day and recruiting have obviously become huge topics in recent years as institutions try to get prospective student athletes to sign national letters of intent. But who is a prospective student athlete? Who is an institutional representative? What is contact? What's a contact period? What's a dead period? How often can you call? Who can you call? All of the rules of recruiting can become very confusing. Article 13 on recruiting in the NCAA manual is 58 dense pages of definitions and rules and guidelines and exceptions to those rules and guidelines. It reads like a cell phone contract wrapped in an extended warranty enclosed in a mortgage agreement. It's impossible to know and retain all of this. But for those who must abide by it, is it intimidating?
Yeah, I don't know about intimidating, but I think it's motivating. I think you are constantly reviewing legislation. You're trying to stay up on what is proposed, what's been approved as far as new legislation, so that you're always in compliance.
Coaches have to pass an annual certification test, and Jewett says that he is in constant contact with his school's compliance officer because it can get downright weird in some cases. For instance, he sometimes has to avoid conversations with people that he has known for years if that person has a daughter that is a prospective student athlete, because that conversation might go beyond what the NCAA calls normal civility.
And we have just a casual encounter, where we're at the mall, we're wherever. Normal civility means I don't have to be rude to them. I don't have to, oh, hey, and then look the other way. It'd be, hey, Tom, how are you doing? Good to see you. I think you know this, but I'm just going to remind you that NCAA rules prohibit me from, carrying on any more of a conversation. Love to talk to you, but I just can't. That would be an example, I think, of normal civility.
Any face-to-face contact Jewett might have with a prospective student athlete or their parent or guardian that goes beyond that simple hello constitutes a contact. And you only get so many of those, and they can only happen during a contact period, when coaches can visit high schools and watch games. Evaluation periods allow less interaction, quiet periods even less, and during dead periods, coaches can't do anything other than write or call a student athlete. Phone calls are still a good way for coaches and kids to communicate, but more and more phone conversations are being replaced by text messaging and other social media.
We don't friend on Facebook. That's just not something we do, but I'm pretty sure it's permissible. It's just something we don't do. Twitter. If we can follow somebody on Twitter, once again, they've started classes their junior year. How we interact with them on Twitter, we don't ever do anything but maybe a direct message on Twitter. That way it's just between us and the prospect. Snapchat is out there. I don't do it, but I know it's out there. So there's some things that with the social world that they just respond to more quickly.
All in all, it can be tricky to navigate the rule book and stay between the lines, and some responsibility does fall on the athlete. But ultimately, the college and the coach bear most of the burden.
High school AU coaches, parents have a responsibility to educate their daughters, but we also have a responsibility throughout that recruiting process in that too. We've got to make sure that we're clearly explaining what is allowable or permissible and what isn't. And we take a lot of pride in that too, so that there's no misunderstandings, no miscommunications, and then obviously no NCAA infractions.
Up next, the recruiting game through the eyes of the coaches. Great stories from the road and the rewards that go with the hard work and the headaches. Welcome back to Midco Sports Magazine. Well, recruiting is the lifeblood of college athletics. And Alex Heinert talked with 4 college coaches who all had great stories about the luck and the charm and the hard work that it takes to survive the recruiting game.
When I say the word recruiting, what comes to mind?
Year-round work, man.
Lifeblood of your program.
You've got to work at it every day. It's like shaving. If you don't do it, you look bad.
It's a lifestyle. It's 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Everything is centered around recruiting. Everything. My entire day in the off season, from as soon as the season ends all the way until August 1, everything is centered around recruiting.
It really never does stop. If you're doing it right, in my opinion, you'll constantly be recruiting.
It's, I would say, at least 75% of our job when the season's over. That's all, essentially that's all we do.
Recruiting is about probably one thing and one thing only, and that's developing relationships.
It's a relationship business, It's relationships with the prospect, it's relationships with the coaches, it's relationships with their parents, it's relationship with their mentors or their grandmother.
You just want to try and build the relationship as soon as possible, and that's really what recruiting is about.
If I don't have a connection with that prospect and I don't feel like he's what we're about, we're going to pass. Even though he might be a really good player and a talented guy, it just will never jive.
It's very stressful in the fact that when you're waiting on a recruit that is the right one. But, if that's the case, there's usually 2 or 3 other schools that believe the same thing.
My eyes were black when I first got hired, and I had countless, all I thought about, I couldn't sleep at night. I just would constantly think about recruit. But it's our lifeline. And if we can't recruit the right types of guys, we're gonna be out the door and the next guy's coming in.
Sometimes in our business, it's one player. That's a big difference between having a good year and a great year. So again, when it is your lifeblood and you know what's at stake, it's pretty easy to get emotional on it.
I used to really stress out about, if I don't get this young man, what the heck's going to happen? Not so much anymore.
Sometimes in the old days, my head would go down and you just almost want to go into a cave and say, man, is this worth it? But I've changed now to just say there's so many players out there that when you lose one, you got to get right back on the horse and you got to go get the next one.
I'll drop everything that I had if a recruit calls or texts me, drives my wife crazy. I'm always on my phone, but it's just the way it is. If I don't respond to a kid and some other coach does, and I miss out on them just for that simple little factor, you gotta be ready to go. And of course, with social media and everything on your phone, on your iPad and computer, you have a whole lot more access.
Before, it was just handwritten. Now it's maybe an email here or there. And now, with Twitter and text and some of it, I'm glad I have a young assistant that can explain to me how to use a lot of the stuff that we do have.
The game continues to change in a better way on that instant communication, but with that, kids expect instant communication.
And if you can play that game, get your message out on Facebook and do all those type of things, then I think, you're a step ahead of the game, but I wouldn't even say you're a step ahead because everybody that's anybody right now, understands that that's how your message has to be marketed.
You say something to the kid, hey, I haven't talked to you for a couple weeks. Yeah, you did, coach. You were texting me last night. Oh yeah, that's right. I was talking to you through the text. It's just, it's just a totally different deal. And so you got to appease to that. You can try to be stubborn and you can try to be quote unquote old school, but that's not reality.
There's no exact process to it. There's some ways you can recruit thinking, I got this figured out. I know what I'm doing now. And then something happens, you're going, wow, what just happened? So that never ends, and I don't expect it ever will.
Yeah, recruiting at every level is different. The lower level, you have to do way more with less. You don't get paid as much. I'm not gonna say you have to work harder, but you have so much more travel time in cars versus flying. At Nebraska, I could go recruiting. I could take myself on a private jet to go fly in to see a kid play and be back that night. But at different places, you're driving 9 hours each way in the same day.
In this business, it's a volatile business. You get hired to get fired sometimes, and if you get great recruits, your longevity in this business probably goes a long, long ways.
There's some luck involved in it too, I guess, but I'd like to think it's prepared skill that you go after the right kids and hopefully you get them.
It's delicate, it's stressful. it's worth it when it works. You know, the joy you get when you get that phone call or you get the text from a kid saying he's coming to you, it's just exciting.
It's a hard job, it's hard work, but it's so rewarding when you get a young man to say yes and you know he did it for the right reasons.
Our job beats working for a living, let's face it. You know, when you love it and you're passionate about coaching guys and being around people, there's no other greater job on earth.
Joined by Alex Heinert, and great story, and just talk about, for the most part, between all these different levels of guys that you talk to, from Division I to NAIA, it seems like they all have really similar experiences through the sport and through the level that they're at.
Yeah, it didn't seem to matter what sport it was, what level they were on. They talked about how important relationships were. If you didn't have a relationship with the kid, it wasn't going to work out. They talked about everybody had a ton of hours put into this, how they had to perfect the craft, but how no matter how long these guys have been doing it, and some of these guys have been coaching for a long time and recruiting for a long time, it's always changing, and there's no set way to do it that's correct.
And you can see why a lot of these guys get hired, though, because you have to have these people skills to go out and do these things, right, and be outgoing.
These guys are fun to talk to, and you could tell immediately like what kind of an atmosphere in the recruiting house you would get if this coach walked in and started giving you his pitch, how that would come across.
Yeah.
And they're good, all those guys, all four of them, fantastic.
And one of them told you that they had to take an etiquette class on enjoying food that maybe they didn't enjoy.
Craig Smith talked about how he just got prepped a little bit more, because he said you go into these homes and he said some people are just dying to feed you. They just can't wait to wine and dine you a little bit. And some of the stuff wasn't that great, but you had to like it, or else it was going to turn off the recruit in the family.
And Coach O at Augie had a story about getting injured in a celebration after he signed a kid.
You talk about just the joy and the kids being excited to be on, to be able to sign to a school. The parents get so excited about this, and he had one student athlete that was so pumped to come to his school. The dad was so excited. He came and gave him a big bear hug. He's a big truck driver guy, and he slipped a disc in Coach OJ's back, and he had to go and get some work done after the fact.
And you said, I think in the story, that this takes up 75-80% of their time during the year to go out and recruit, right?
Yeah, these guys say this is all they do in the off season. I mean, and it is a big part of what they do during the year. And for an assistant coach as well, that's their main job. It's player retention certainly and game plan, but it's also trying to figure out who's going to fit this program and who's going to be the guys on the court and on the field in the years to come.
Because you're depending on, for your job, for these guys, you're depending on these 18, 19-year-old kids coming in. Right?
It's an incredible amount of pressure, and you saw, again, these guys they're stressed out about it sometimes, because it's your livelihood, and if you don't do it well, and Coach Trapp said it, you get hired to get fired. If you're not going to be there very long if you can't do it well.
One more good story on something maybe that you learned that kind of opened your eyes.
One of the big things that, I was surprised how the lengths that some programs and some booster clubs go to get these kids into their programs, and not necessarily legal lengths. And Craig Smith, who's been at Nebraska and been at Colorado State, mentioned that at the top levels, people will do whatever it takes, and you have to figure out pretty quick which AAU programs and which college programs are not on the level, because if they want a guy that you want, you're not going to get him. Yeah, exactly.
Well, up next, the recruiting game from the athlete's angle. Is success worth all the stress? Jason Andera has that story next. Welcome back to Midco Sports Magazine and our look at recruiting. Well, it is an honor, it's an opportunity to play college athletics, but it can be very stressful on high school kids. Jason Andera has more on that, including the story on one high school football player who really embraced the process, liked the attention, and went to great lengths to get himself noticed.
Right now, there are hundreds of thousands of high school athletes across the country with aspirations to play college ball. But roughly 10% actually move on to the NCAA level. And of those college athletes, only approximately 2 of 10 receive an athletic scholarship to do so.
There's other people working just as hard, and if you're thinking you're working hard, just think, hey, there's someone out there in the world that's working just as hard to get that spot.
A college recruiting journey can take many twists and turns, and everyone's story is unique. For one of those unique stories, we start with this guy.
And you have to take initiative of your own recruiting process, because it's not just going to be handed to you.
This is a glimpse of how one player took extreme measures to initiate his recruiting process. A couple of years ago, an assistant coach at the IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida, took a look at some online footage of a high school sophomore from South Dakota. Sent a Facebook message to invite him to play football in Florida, then waited for his response. That sophomore named Mikey Daniel, sensing a big opportunity to learn and experience football at a high level, said, "Sure," then headed 1,700 miles from his home for his junior year of high school football.
When I had that opportunity, I jumped all over it just because, I felt like that was the key to helping me reach my next level and helping me fulfill my dreams. So I jumped all over that. Not taking anything away from Brookings, obviously, but it's an opportunity that, I don't know, I was mesmerized by it, I would say.
The IMG Academy is a prep school designed to create prep stars into elite NCAA athletes in many sports, including football. He feels his experience at the academy got him prepared to think like a college football player.
The days down there are exhausting, and it was a lot like college, getting me ready for college, and that's exactly what it is college prep school. So we went to school for 4 hours a day, and then we would practice from anywhere between 2 to 7, 1 to 7. It didn't matter. We were out there all day.
After just a semester of rigorous football training in Florida, Daniel returned to his high school and community in Brooking, South Dakota. He turned in a stellar senior season and helped his team make it to the state finals. Does Mikey have any regrets how he handled his own recruiting process?
Yeah, I don't regret it at all. 100% believe that it was the best thing for me. And just because now I know what college is like, down there, football, it was the job. That you lived, you ate, you slept, you breathed football. That's all there was to it. I'm really happy I made that decision to go down there.
It's always a delicate dance between the player, the school, and a limited number of spots and scholarships. They don't always match up in a timely manner.
The recruiting process is very stressful. It's a lot of fun, don't get me wrong, but it's very, very stressful. There are days where things aren't always going the way that you want them to, and coaches are telling you this thing, they're telling you that, come to our school, come to our campus here. And it gets kind of stressful. They want you all to come to camp. It's a lot of traveling, a lot of visits. And there's some days where it gets to me and I just want to break down and cry. Like it gets that stressful.
A common theme for players is the anxiety of waiting for just the right offer.
It was amazing to be wanted by everyone, but it caused kind of some stress because there were so many things that I need to sort out between colleges and I didn't even really know how to do that yet.
I've told everyone it was the hardest decision I've had to make in my life, and it was just a really tough decision.
Yeah, it was stressful because I didn't have a ton of offers, especially from some schools that I wanted to. So I was happy when I got that Ohio State one, and it kind of let go a little bit. So.
Joined by Jason Andera, and let's go back to Mikey Daniel. First of all, you've had a lot of contact with him, gotten to know him very well, and he kind of took a different tack, didn't he? Both in what he did, the lengths he went to, and his attitude about it. He really embraced this whole process, didn't he?
Yeah, there's not many sophomores who decide to move 1,700 miles away from home to get noticed at a higher level, and he was really into raising his stock up a little bit, and when he saw that opportunity, he took it, and he's glad he did. Not the typical way that people will go to get noticed. But the first step is typical, is putting your stuff online, and he did that at a very early age to get noticed.
It took him to go through all this to find out where he really fit, though, didn't it? And where did he end up?
It did, and again, it's all about managing expectations. Going into this, he was just shooting for the stars at the highest level he could possibly get. Throughout this year, he's been contacted consistently by Georgia Tech, by schools on the West Coast, preferred walk-ons from big schools like Nebraska and Oregon, but he didn't know exactly how much interest they had on the other side, and that's the tough part of this for these kids. They know they have some interest, they don't know how much, and he had these good solid offers from FCS schools. He said he would consider a couple FCS schools, SDSU and NDSU. He considered them both, and in the end, after all of this promotion and trying to figure out what he wanted to do, he decides to move just down the street and play with the Jackrabbits, which is a very solid Division I program.
All right, and when it came down to it, it got stressful for him toward the end of the process, right? All these other kids you talk to, talk about the stress of it and the relief when they finally sign. Why are they so stressed out? What is it about this whole thing?
This surprised me the most out of anything doing this story. Going into the story, I thought, I was never recruited. I thought, wow, it'd be great to get recruited, to be wanted by so many people. And they all talked about the stress of the situation. Mikey talks about the stress of go to my camp. Yeah, you got to travel to go do this. You have to decide which visits you're going to take, which ones you're not going to take. How much money of your own money are you going to spend on this stuff? That's a big part of the stress. The other part of the stress is just not knowing, like I said, not knowing how much the other schools like you, which schools are interested, how interested are they, and time and time again, you get that theme. We are stressed out by this. And the only couple people that weren't stressed out by it were people I talked to who committed very early. We've seen SDSU, the women's team, do this for a long time, is really get those verbal commitments early. Jessica Maris and Sydney Palmer, 2 players who committed as sophomores. That relieved a little bit of their stress level. They knew what they wanted, they got what they wanted, and it was a very easy process for them.
And as you say, the kids have no idea going into this what the rules are, what they can do, how this is all going to interact with coaches and institutions. But there are actually programs now set up for high school kids that are going to go through this process.
That adds to the stress, yes. And the stress is not just with the kids, it's with the parents. Sometimes their expectations are totally different than what happens in real life, and sometimes the kids' expectations are totally different. And you're right, everybody goes into this not knowing what to expect. But now, Coach Riggs here at with Sanford Power in Sioux Falls actually put together a class for kids to just be introduced to this whole recruiting process so they know what to get into. He said he wasn't sure how many people would be interested in it. He got a full room the first time he opened it up at his combine, and obviously a lot of kids interested in what all goes on in recruiting.
All right, good stuff. Thanks, Jason Andera. Well, our thanks to all the coaches and the kids who helped us out. We'll see you next time on Midco Sports Magazine.